In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make three different types of paint. A metallic paint that has metallic flakes in it, a pearlescent paint which produces a pearl type effect around bright light sources, and an opalescent paint which changes color depending on the viewing angle. All three of these materials use essentially pretty much the same node setup. The only difference between them is that in the metallic paint, I use a Voronoi texture to generate the sparkly metallic flake appearance. In the pearlescent paint, I don't use any texture at all. It's just glossiness with a certain amount of roughness to give it this pearl effect. And in the opalescent paint, I use the layer weight node to determine the color transition from the center of the center of the view of the object to the edge of the object. Let's look at the nodes. The node setup for the metallic paint basically consists of a Voronoi texture that is being run through a brightness contrast node to determine how much of the Voronoi texture is being used to produce the metallic flakes. By turning this up to 50, I get an all or nothing effect where some of the flakes are visible and some are not. And the -2 for the brightness that allows me to determine the concentration of the flakes. If I turn this, let me turn the size of the cells down so you can see the flakes a little better. If I turn the brightness back up to 0, you can see that the density of the flakes is greater. If I turn it down to -5, there's less flakes. So you can use the brightness to determine the concentration of the flakes. A good value somewhere around -5 to -2. If you turn the contrast down, you will see. Let me get onto the edge of the nope. Turn that down to 200 so it's easier to see the flakes. If what the contrast does is it determines how much variation there is in the brightness of the flakes. At 50, it's pretty much all full brightness flakes. There are a few flakes that are slightly darker. You can see that here, and here a couple of flakes here. But these two settings determine the appearance of the flakes. What I then do is I take the output of the brightness contrast node and multiply it with a layer weight node that I run through a subtract. I subtract it from 1 in order to reverse the direction of the layer weight, because I want it to be brighter in the center of the object and darker on the edge. And what this does is it reverses that. Otherwise it would be the opposite. It would be bright on the edge and dark in the middle. And I multiply these two so that I get a combined effect of the edge becoming darker and darker and darker, and the visibility of the flakes. I then use that to control the mix shader, which determines whether you're seeing the diffuse base color, which in this case is dark blue, or a glossy color, which is the color of the metallic flakes. In this case, it's a kind of a pinkish color with a roughness of about 0.2. Now the roughness here I think is key. If you turn this down to 0, the effect of the metallic flakes isn't as good. You can still see them, but they look a little dimmer. The light needs to be brighter in order for the sparkly effect to be noticeable. But a good amount of roughness is around 0.2. And I use the hue saturation value node to control the color, because this way I can control the value of the node and the saturation if I want. One of the key things of making a metallic paint that looks good is you want to use a dark base color and a dark saturated base color and a lighter, less saturated metallic flake color. The less saturated metallic flake color gives you a greater variation in the brightness of the flakes. If this were saturated, if I made this fully saturated, it doesn't. Let me put that back there. If I make this fully saturated, it doesn't look as good, because now it seems like you get the same brightness of red all the way to the edge and then it just goes away. But by making this less saturated, I get more variation in the brightness of the flakes. You can see how the flakes are bright here and then they get dim as you approach the edge of the reflection. So you might want to play around with the roughness. If you don't like the amount of glow that you have around the bright reflections, you could turn it down. If you turn it up, it might be excessive. Then the glow spreads too far outward from the reflection, and you don't get the variation, which gives it that metallic look. It just looks like a shiny ball with just dark edges. So a value of 0.2 is a good value. Then after I do that, oh, one other thing. The way this works here is that the brightness, the brightness produced by the contrast is so high that you're either seeing a metallic flake or the background color, the diffuse color. There is no in between where you've got 50% gloss and 50% base color or some other range in between. It's either 100% gloss or 100% diffuse, and that's what gives you this contrast, this high contrast between the metallic flake and the base color. Okay, the next thing that I do is then I add a glossy layer with about a 0.1 roughness on it, and with mixed in on top of the paint at about a 0.3 mix ratio. And what this does is it gives you a blue glow over the metallic flakes, or essentially a blue gloss over the entire object, but mostly visible because of the roughness. You only see this gloss, this blue glow around bright light sources. It's a little faint here because I've got an outdoor environment. I think if I turn off the background, it might be easier to see. Yeah, you can see the blue glow here around this bright light source. You can change that amount by increasing or reducing this roughness. A value of 0.1 is good. If you make it too high, it's less visible. If you make it too small, it's a little bit too concentrated in the middle. What this effect does is it makes it look like the metallic flakes are embedded in this blue material. You want this glow, you want this glossy layer to have the same color as the base material, in this case the diffuse color, so that you get this effect. It makes it look like the flakes are just beneath the surface of the material. Let me put this back. And go back to here. Zoom back out. And then on top of that, I add a glossy node with no roughness whatsoever. This should really be set to sharp, because what I found is that the sharp produces a better gloss, and I also noticed that it tends to make this blue glossy layer a little bit more visible. It seems like with the Beckman, you can see the difference here. If I use Beckman, the rim of the object tends to be this white gloss, but if I switch to sharp, it gets a little bit bluer, so that you're seeing the lower glossy layer a little bit more. Now that all depends on taste. If you like the gloss to reflect the environment color more than this base gloss, set it to Beckman. If you want to see the base gloss more, set it to Sharp. You can always control this separately by, turning up this mix shader, which is what I use to control the amount of gloss. 0.1 is a good value. If you turn it up to 0.2, you can bring out that gloss a little bit more so that you see more of the environment color rather than the base gloss. You don't want to turn this up too high because it'll start to wash out the metallic flake color or the base texture. And then I use the same the same glossy node with a layer weight node to give it just a little bit more gloss around the edge. A value of 0.5 is good, so you get only that gloss right around the edge, and it doesn't encroach too much into the middle of the object and cover up the color of the base and the metallic flakes. Get this back down to about 0.2. So that is the basic setup, and this produces this effect, which I think looks better than the other method. This gives you a much higher contrast between the metal flakes and the base color, so you do get this sparkly effect. And like I mentioned earlier, the effect works best with a dark saturated base color and a light desaturated metal flake color. The desaturated metal flake color gives you greater variation in the brightness, or a more visible variation in the brightness, than using a fully saturated color. For some reason, you just see the full color of the metal flakes, and then it just goes dark right at the edge. This gives you a much smoother, more appealing transition. You can change the size of the flakes. A good value is about 1,000, is what I use here, and that gives you the best appearance. Any of these settings you can play around with. If you want it to be glossier, turn up the gloss. If you want to make the blue glow a little bit more visible, turn that up. You can turn down the contrast if you want it to be less visible. Turn that down. It makes the flakes a little bit darker. And if you do that, you're going to have to turn the brightness back up. Probably be around 0. A value of around 20 to 10. You want to turn the brightness up so that you can see the flakes a little bit more. Maybe a -2. So you can control the concentration of the metal flakes using the brightness and the visibility and the variation in the brightness of the flakes using the contrast. At lower contrast, you will see more random variation in the brightness of the flakes. A higher contrast will give you either all the flakes will be full brightness with just a few a little bit darker. And then you can change the brightness, or the overall brightness of the metal flakes, by changing the value of the hue saturation value node that is being used for the color. The next material is the pearlescent material. Now, really the only difference between the pearlescent material and the metallic paint, let me select, there we go, is that I just don't use the Voronoi texture to control this metallic flake effect at all. It's just basically a diffuse node and the same glossy nodes. All the other settings are exactly the same as in the metal flake material. I just don't use the Voronoi texture to create the metal flake effect. I do use the same layer weight node, run through a subtract node to invert the effect to control the transition from the middle to the edge. But everything else is the same amount of roughness as in the metallic paint. The same gloss with the slight amount of roughness and the other two glossy layers. I probably use a slightly smaller amount of on the layer weight node here, because there's no metal flake effect here. There's a lot more glossiness on the object, so that you want to move this glossiness further out. The only other thing you probably need to do is turn down the brightness of the highlight of the opalescent. I'm sorry, the pearlescent material. If I use the same brightness as I use in the metallic flakes, it's just way too bright, and you can see that here. You know, I mean, if you like this is fine, but here it just takes over the whole material, and you get very little of the diffuse. I mean, you can change that by turning up the layer weight. Maybe if you got to turn it up to 0.9. If you like that look, it's probably a little bit too blown out for my taste. A value of 0.7 is good with a brightness of 1. That's a good range, so that you don't get this glow around the bright reflections being too big. But every other setting is the same mixing ratios, same roughness, the same glossy nodes. In this case, I use sharp instead of Beckman, but again, it's the same as with the gloss. It's the same as with the metallic. Depends on your taste. If you like, depending on whether you want to see that base blue glow, the base blue gloss more, or the environment reflection more. And so this produces a really good pearlescent effect. The same rules apply as to the metallic paint. You want a dark base color and a dark saturated base color, and a light, less desaturated or less saturated highlight color, or in this case pearl color. And you can see this looks like almost this looks to me, every time I look at this I go, wow, that looks exactly like copper, except for this blue glow here. I mean, I could, if I made this white, or even a darker version of this color, it would look like copper. You would think that this was a copper. This object was made out of copper. Let's see. Oh, and you can see the difference here is, in order to turn this into this, all it really takes is just reattach the Voronoi texture and turn up the brightness to 5, and I have the same material as I have here. So that's really all there is between these two materials. Get rid of the Voronoi texture, use the layer weight to control the transition around the edge. Actually, looking at this, that actually looks pretty good. It might be a little bright for copper, but that looks like a copper object. Turn that down to 1 so you can see what I'm saying here. Put that back to, yeah, that should be 1 for the pearl, and then just hook the inverted layer weight node to get the dark rimmer on the edge, and you have the pearlescent material. And for the final material, which is this opalescent material here, the only difference between this and the metallic material is that the opalescent material has the metal flakes in it. So I use the Voronoi texture to do that, the same as in the metallic material. But now I also use a layer weight, an inverted, well, actually not an inverted. In this case, I don't want it to be inverted, although you can. It doesn't really matter. It would just change the direction of the color transition. I use a layer weight node to control the hue of the color, of the highlight color. So here the base color again is this dark blue color, which you can see around the edge, and then I'm using this layer weight node to control the hue. I run it through this multiply because if you feed the layer weight directly into the hue, then the color transition is too rapid, and you get too many colors. You can see that here. This is a little bit unrealistic for a pearlescent. I'm sorry, for an opalescent material. You want the color transitions to be less than this. You don't want to see this many colors. So a value of 0.2 gives you a good look. You get this reddish magenta color slowly transitioning to this light blue color in the center. You can see that here and on this object here. With this, you want to have the brightness be around 0 so that you get a higher flake concentration. If you set this to minus 5, the concentration of flakes gets less, and the color is a little bit more subdued. You see more of the base material. I mean, if you like this, I think it looks better with a higher flake concentration. It makes this opalescent color more visible and more obvious here. Otherwise, you'll see the base color. Of course, you can always fiddle around with that. You know, you can control that with this inverted layer weight nodes. If you want to see more of the base color, you can turn that up. If you want to see less of it, turn that down, so that you get the opalescent material going all the way to the edge. So you have to take that into account, because in reality you've got with this opalescent material, you really have 3 colors. You have the 2 colors that you're transitioning from that you're using for the opalescent look, or actually, in this case 1, 2, 3 colors, and the base color. So you don't want to have too many colors, because then it won't look good. You also want to have colors that are kind of work together. In this case, this blue, this magenta, this dark blue, and this cyan all kind of work well together. If you change the highlight color to be something else, it's going to be a little. Let's see, which is the one that doesn't look too great. Like here, if you choose, let me see, one of these is yellow. If you choose a color that produces yellow, what happens is, you can see the yellow here, but since yellow is a complementary color to blue, what ends up happening is they mix, and they start to look white, and it starts to desaturate in this case, the yellow color. So you almost see yellow throughout the whole object. You're not really seeing any other color other than yellow here. So the color choice is important here. Although like I said, if you choose a desaturated color, which is what you want, that yellow color gets even less visible and becomes almost a white color. So you don't want to really choose complementary colors for the highlight and the base material, because of that problem where they'll mix and produce white. Let me put that back. Where was I? Here, I think. There we go. There we go. So you can see that effect there. And again, this is the same as the metallic material. This is the only difference being, in this case, that I'm just controlling the hue using a layer weight node with a multiply to control the color transitions from the center of the object to the edge of the object. And all the other settings are the same, again with gloss and the mixing ratios of the different amounts of gloss to produce this effect. And as a comparison, you can see the difference between this method of doing the metallic paint and the other method, which is this. I'm using the same colors as I'm using for this, for my metallic paint. The same base color, the same what I'm assuming is highlight color, because that's the light color in this method. And I've left the settings the way it's done in the tutorial for creating the metallic paint. But you can see the difference here. There's not, this is kind of muted. There's too much, in my opinion, there's too much mixing between the base color and what is supposed to be this highlight color. The transition is too smooth so that you don't get this bright glow around the object, in spite of the huge amounts the huge amount of roughness that there is in this material. You're still not getting this glow, and I don't think there is. Yeah, because this is a diffuse color, you're not going to see the glow of the highlight. You're only going to see it on the gloss. And even this, this white gloss here, I'm still not seeing any glow around these highlights, even though there's this white gloss here. Or where's the, or even this blue gloss, which has this huge amount of roughness. I'm not seeing any blue glow, and that's because this roughness is just way too high. If you make the roughness of this glow too high, it just spreads all over the object and you don't even see it. It needs to be low so that it's concentrated around the bright light sources. But there it is. You can see the difference in my method of doing the metallic paint and the other method. And finally, here is a rendering that I did of 4 materials using a sample of about 2,000 here. That's set to 1,000. I actually did it at 2,000. 2, 3. But here you see on the left hand side, you see the metallic paint material with the metallic flakes, the pearlescent material here, the opalescent material, and the material that's done using the other method of producing the metallic paint. You can see the difference between them. This is a rendering, like I said, of about 2,000 samples. At this scale, this is the size of the flakes here is a good size and concentration, so you can see the sparkly effect here. Same with the opalescent material. Here you can also see the reflections off the materials. For these two objects here, you can see that the reflection color matches the color of the metallic material. Here in the case of this one, the metallic flakes, and here the pearlescent material. Here you're seeing the reflection off this light blue color, so this is more of a whiter color, and here you're seeing the reflection off of both the white glossy layer and the blue glossy layer. You're not seeing the pink reflection because in this material that's done using a diffuse color, a diffuse node rather than a glossy node. So here you can compare the 4 ways of doing these materials.